Welcome back to another Mech Deck Tech. Today we're going over Quick Draw, a Precon from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, helmed by Stella Lee Wildcard. Stella Lee is a 2/4 human rogue that wishes it was a wizard for 3 mana. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you get to Impulse Draw, and you could tap them to copy an instant or sorcery spell that you control. You get to choose new targets for the copy, but you can only activate this if you cast at least 3 spells. As always, we are going to cut out 10 cards that I don't think quite fit as well as we would like, add 10 cards in, and go from there. Let's take a look at what didn't make that cut. Starting off, we have a very expensive 2/2 wizard. They are flashable, which is nice. When they enter the battlefield, the next instant or sorcery that you cast has Storm, which is good, right? Not downplaying the ability. It is a one-off thing. If we were playing some sort of flicker effects, which we could since we are in blue, I think we have some value here. But that being said, 5 mana for a 2/2 that requires us to also have mana up to cast another spell. They're dead in hand early game. And even, to an extent, up through, mid-game. Because the low-cost spells you don't really want to cast anyways with Storm. They're not doing a whole lot. And the high ones obviously cost you a ton of mana. So, for that reason, they had to go. Cursed Mirror is a 3-cost mana rock. Generally don't like these just on principle. Cursed Mirror is actually not bad, though. So Cursed Mirror is a mana rock that enters as a copy of a creature on the battlefield, except that it has haste. It is only a copy of that creature until end of turn. There is a blue mana rock artifact that kind of does something similar. I think it costs 4 instead of 3, but it retains the fact that it has all those creatures' effects and is not a creature, remains an artifact. Either way, we're rambling. It's not bad. I think there's probably some combo potential there, but it's not great, so for that reason, I let it go. Eris, Roar of the Storm. 4/4 for 10. It does have a reduction built into itself for each different mana value among instants and sorceries in your grave. Has flying, has prowess. Whenever you cast your second, you do get a 4/4 elemental creature with flying and prowess. Ultimately, hear me out, I feel like they're probably really cool to build around. But I don't feel like they do well in 99. I don't feel like we have a wide enough variety of mana costs among our instants and sorceries to really kind of get his costs down. So, again, he's very dead early game. He gets better as the game goes on, but I think that's a little too slow for me. Murmuring Mystic is a 1/5 for 4, so the stats are honestly just abysmal. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you do get to create a 1/1 bird, which is fine. We have better cast a spell, get a token creatures in the deck, so I was fine with cutting him. Octavia Living Thesis costs 10 for an 8/8 with Ward 8. So basically, Ward, you're never paying this. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, a creature on your side of the field, I guess it doesn't have to be yours. A creature somewhere becomes an 8/8. Which is, again, fine. I mean, it works well with, the Murmuring Mystic, which we've already cut. Really any of those creatures that generate some flying tokens for us casting these spells. They do cost 8 less, so for a mere 2 mana we could get them out if we have 8 instants or sorceries in our grave. But again, a little too slow for me. Propaganda is the only form of taxation we have in this deck. It's splashable, it's fine, but I don't think we need it. You could cut something else if you really were like, no, I really feel like that taxation kind of holds us together and keeps people from overwhelming our board. Terramander, a 1/1 flyer for 1, so already not bad. For 8, you could adapt for it. It does cost 1 less for each instance and sorcery in our grave. So it could cost as low as a single blue to make him into a 5/5 flyer. But, again, just a little slow. He's fine on turn 1. He definitely feels kind of aggressive. But, again, a little too slow to kind of get that ability off. I think we could do better. Winged Boots. So for 2 mana you play it, 1 to equip, so you're investing 3 mana here. The equipped creature will get flying and ward 4. Decent ward, flying is good evasion. Ultimately, it doesn't synergize with what we're doing. We're actually not doing a lot of attacking in this deck. Our end goal really feels like we are trying to storm off in some sense, which is how I tend to play these spell-slinging decks. So, for that reason, I let it go. Think twice. Draw a card, could be flashed back. Not bad, not great. Felt like we had other instants and sorceries and other cards that are a little more important that we could slot in and kind of get more value. Last up for our cuts is Smoldering Stagecoach. So its power is equal to the number of instants and sorceries we have in our grave. Whenever Smoldering Stagecoach attacks, the next instant or sorcery spell we cast has Cascade. They are an artifact vehicle, so we do need to crew them in order to have them attack. And again, they just feel a little slow. The Cascade is nice, but also, again, requires us to kind of have big mana for a big spell that happens to be cast specifically in main phase 2, possibly during combat, but like, it feels a little situational. With those 10 cards out, of course we have to add 10 cards back in, so what are they? Well, I said we are storming off, and 1,000 Year Storm accomplishes that. So, pretty budget, sits around like the $3-4 mark. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you're going to copy it for each one you've already cast before. You can choose new targets for the copies. So everything has Storm. It does cost 6 mana, so a little expensive, but I think we'll get there pretty quickly. And we're really just looking to storm off, get a bunch of value out of our spells. We're looking to cast multiple spells in a single turn, so I think it'll be a good time. Fiery Inscription is another ad. When it enters the battlefield, we are going to be tempted by the ring. We're not here for that. It's fine, I guess. Not super relevant, though. The more important part is that whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we are going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. So a nice little bit of burn that's going to be everlasting for all of our opponents. Speaking of getting extra value, we're looking at Twinning Staffs. It's around like the $3 to $5 mark. 3 mana, we could pay 7 to copy an instant or sorcery of our choice, and if we would copy from any source, we get some extra copy out of it. River Song's Diary is a little more flexible, a little more what we're trying to do, because it's repeatable. So whenever we cast an instant or sorcery from hand, we're going to exile it instead of putting it in the grave as it resolves. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we have at least 4 cards exiled, we do get to choose 1 at random and cast it for free. Primal Amulet. So, reduces the cost of our instant and sorceries, we love that. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we do get to put a charge counter onto the amulet, and once there are 4 on it, we get to remove those counters and transform it. We're transforming it into Primal Wellspring, a land that adds 1 mana of any color, and whenever that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery, we are going to copy it, and we can choose new targets for the copies. We are also adding in Return the Favor, a spree card from Thunder Junction, so for 2 red, we get to cast it. It does require us to choose at least 1 mode, but we could copy a target instant or sorcery spell. We get to choose new targets for it. So Twinning Staff is doing a lot of work here, right? And we could change the target of a spell or ability with a single target. So, really solid. It's going to do work for us. Moving up into our sorceries, we did add a copy of Grape Shot. We are kind of hoping to really storm off well with this deck and just sort of amass a great amount of value, possibly take out an opponent or two. It'll be a good time. Moving up into our creatures, we have added Slick Shot Show Off. A 2-cost plottable dude, Flying Haste 1/2, not bad stats. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, he gets pumped by +2/+0 for the turn, and he could be plotted, so we're able to kind of get a couple of these off. Through plots, we're going to cast some extra spells, basically. Crom, Violent Cacophony. A 4-cost 2/3 with flying. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, which we're already trying to do, they're going to get a +1/+1 counter and draw us a card, keeping our hand nice and full. Last up for our additions is Dual Caster Mage. A flashable 2/2 for 3. Whenever it ETBs, we do get to copy an instant or sorcery. And we get to choose new targets for that copy. With our proper additions out of the way, let's take a look at some things that didn't make the cut, either just due to cost or they didn't quite make my top 10, but would still make solid additions to the deck. We're looking at Baral and Kari Zev. For 3, we do get a 2/4 First Striking Menacey Boy. Whenever we cast our first instant or sorcery each turn, we do get to cast another one that shares a type from our hand. That has to have less cost, right? The mana value has to be less. If we don't do that, we do get a 2/1 Pirate Monkey that has haste. Baral, Chief of Compliance, could help us to reduce the cost of all of our instant sorceries, which is nice. Whenever we counter anything, we get to draw and discard. We're not actually running a ton of counter spells in this deck in particular, which is why he didn't make the cut for me. It sits around like the $2 to $3 mark, but is strong. Bergi, God of Storytelling, sits around like the $14 to $16 mark. They're actually really strong though, so whenever we cast a spell, we are adding red mana to our mana pool, which we don't lose for the rest of the turn. The fact that creatures can boast twice is really irrelevant here. It's really that first ability that we care about. Exalted Flamer of Zinch. Probably mispronouncing that. Let me know, Warhammer fans. But this is a 2/4 for 4. At the beginning of our upkeep, we get to return an instant or sorcery at random from our grave to our hand. So just really letting us replay all of our instant and sorcery spells. And whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, they will deal 1 to each opponent. They're sitting between like $10 and $13. Fibblethip, Lost on the Range. He's just a little guy. So he's a 3-cost 1/1 with Ward 2. We do get to look at the top of our library. We could plot any of the cards that are on top of our library, and the plot cost is equal to their mana cost. We can only specifically plot non-lands, which makes sense. Lands don't actually have a mana cost. Their mana cost is in 0. They are not spells. Surprisingly affordable. He's sitting around like the 50-cent to $1 mark. Oger, Pack Patik, Deepest Epoch. So a 4-cost 4/3 with flying. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, it does gain a rebound. Urbrask. So a 4/4 for 4 with first strike. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we're going to deal 1 damage to one opponent and add red. The $15 to $20 mark is really why he didn't quite make the cut. I felt like my last upgrade guide was a little expensive, which isn't really what I'm aiming to do. So I tried to cut back a little bit in this one. We have solved the equation, so it's around like the $4 mark. It literally lets us tutor up any instant or sorcery in our deck. It is just good. Personal Tutor is less mana, but puts it on top. Sits around the $5 to like $7 mark. Following those two up, we actually have just a handful of extra turn sorceries. There are others. You're welcome to play any you want, obviously. Surprisingly affordable. This is actually only like $2.50 for a Karn's Temporal Sundering. It is a 6-cost, take an extra turn spell, but pretty good. We have Expropriate, sits around like 20 bucks. Beacon of Tomorrow sits around 5. Auron's Epiphany sits around like the $4 to $7 range. They're all good though. Seething Song is just an example of this, but there's a couple other red spells that do it where it's like, hey, spend a little mana, get a bunch of red mana for the turn. Slick Sequencing is super budget. It deals 2 damage to a target. If we've already cast another spell, it does act as a cantrip, drawing us a card. 3 steps ahead sits between like $5 and $8. It's just a spree card, which lets us counter a spell, create a token of an artifact or creature, and draw cards, having to discard 1, but basically a net of 0. Mind Splice Apparatus just wasn't in my top 10, but is actually really good if you have a lot of high-cost instants and sorceries. But basically, at the beginning of your upkeep, you do get to put an oil counter on it. Every instant and sorcery you cast costs 1 less for each oil counter on it. Finally, we're down to some honorable mention enchantments with Sorcerer class, which is going to enter the battlefield, have a draw 2, discard 2, so a little bit of card selection. Turns our creatures into mana dorks, specifically for instant and sorcery cards. And lastly, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, that spell will deal damage to each opponent, equal to the number of instants and sorceries we've cast this turn. Curiosity. This is literally in here because we have Niv Mizzet in the deck, and it's literally just an infinite combo. So, yay, we win on the spot if we hit somebody, or just draw a card when we have this equipped, which we have ways of doing. And the last honorable mention is also pretty budget. It's Case of the Ransacked Lab, a 3-cost enchantment case. Reduces the cost of our instants and sorceries. We've seen a couple cards that do this. Once we have cast at least 4 instant or sorceries in a single turn, we get to solve it. And once solved, whenever we cast instant or sorceries, we get to draw cards. So it requires a little bit of a setup in order to solve, but still very good. But guys, that is the upgrade guide. I hope you liked it. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. We are looking to grow. We're looking to eventually, very likely post-wedding, start recording some gameplay and letting you guys see, some fair magic. Totally fair magic. Not at all bullshit shenanigans. Trust me. But like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. But until next time, I'm Mech, and good luck with your builds.